Hi, good evening, everybody. Welcome to the webinar. It is Tuesday, October 4th, 2016, and tonight's broadcast is about multiple placements and treatment failures. And this was requested of me. It's the second time that it's been requested of me by therapists because a lot of the clients and students that we deal with have been in other programs before. Sometimes they even come back to our program more than once. And I think that can be such a deflating process, especially as it becomes a pattern for families and children. It can become a very deflating process. So hopefully what I will paint tonight is a big picture about how to think about relapse, how to think about regression, how to think about multiple attempts. I remember one story from years ago when I was dealing with a child who had been in other programs before and then came to ours, and the mother had done a lot of her significant work. And at one point I was talking about surrendering and letting go, and she said, through half laugh and half tears, she said, I don't want to surrender. I've already been surrendering enough. I want to stop having to surrender. And it was honest and it was true. And there was also in that an awareness of how much this process asks of us. And I think that's the one thing that really creates to us this fraternity of parents who have been through this process is how much sacrifice, how much pain, how much difficulty, how complicated the answers are, and how it requires a kind of a transformation and a painful one at that. So let's talk about regression. We talk about that in its own webinar, but we'll talk about it in the context of those you've had some significant improvements and who are now experiencing regression or have experienced it many times. I talk about this story that I remember years ago where I was at a parent meeting and several of the parents were going around introducing themselves, telling their stories of their child. And it so happened that a few of them had been at the same therapeutic school after Evoke. And when it got to one grandfather, he said, I'm feeling kind of discouraged. I feel like you guys burst my bubble because I'm at that point where my granddaughter is graduating from the program and I'm experiencing this wilderness high. And some of you are going to have been to the same school that my daughter is going to. And so I'm just kind of adjusting to that. And of course, all the parents rushed in to try to comfort him and rescue him from his discomfort. And he stopped them after their attempts. And he said, no, it's okay. I'm not feeling bad. In fact, I think I needed it. I think I had imagined that we had arrived. And I'm glad to be warned of the reality that this is a long, long book. And this is just one chapter that we're on. And I think there's so much wisdom in that story. And I think all of us can relate to both sides of that story about where we felt that wilderness side. We felt like we had arrived. We felt like we had moved past certain behaviors, certain dynamics. And then we re-experienced them and it can be devastating. And so that story always reminds me of the value of having our bubble burst in that way and recognizing that we never arrive, that we're always on a journey. I think when our clients, our students, our children go through transitions, there's always stress. Transitions in life are some of the greatest stressors, right? It's the weakest point of our functioning sometimes because we're letting go of some old things that we felt attached to, that offered us comfort, that we felt familiar with. And then we're moving into something new. We haven't quite grabbed on and attached ourselves to those new pieces of comfort or support. And so that's our most vulnerable time. So it's natural for there to be stress. I tell the story of juggling. It's my favorite story to illustrate regression, especially post-evoke, which is if you teach somebody how to juggle 3 balls and they get good at it, and then you hand them 3 more balls, they're not going to be able to juggle 6 balls. That doesn't mean that they forgot how to juggle. It just means that it's a different animal. It's a different challenge. There's more there. So when you reintroduce life, even family, even coming home, or stress or peer pressure or school or work responsibilities or just exposure to temptations, right, to old triggers, all of those things, you're asking somebody to juggle a lot more balls. And so being patient with, in an emotional sense, being patient with regression is really important. Being rigid around it, fearful of it. It doesn't mean that and I'll talk about this a little bit later, it doesn't mean that we don't have any accountability, that we take it for granted in the sense that it gives us permission. It's not that, but rather we have some perspective. We take a step back. You know, there's an analogy from sports psychology. I like to use golf because it's a game that very few people master, and it's very difficult, and you can actually go through periods of time where you do very well and don't do very well. And even if you practice on the practice range, even if you practice your swing, once you get on that first tee box, especially if you're in a tournament, especially if there's people watching you, you're going to regress back to what is most comfortable, your old habits, not the new things that you learn, not the new things that you've been practicing. And I think that happens to all of us. We go back to what is comfortable. Having more choices, we see that as a liberty. It's something desirable for our children and us, but sometimes it's a liability. I even think in parenting, I've been talking about this lately with parents, this idea that my mother and father had an advantage over many of us, had an advantage over me and many of you, because we didn't have enough money that they had to make a lot of decisions around boundaries with support. They just couldn't do it. And so they weren't being clever or practicing tough love. They just didn't have the option. You and I, sometimes we have to choose. How much do we support our children? How much do we give to them? And that becomes, like I said, a liability, not necessarily an asset in our own psyche, in our own psychology, in our own functioning. I think we need to watch and learn and pay attention to how our children experiment with themselves and others. It is rare, although it does happen. It is rare for a child to come here, have a wonderful program, and that's not very rare, that happens all the time, and then to leave here with a consistently upward trajectory without any slip-ups. That's very rare. The most common, and our research shows this, the most common trajectory is to leave here and at each transition, whatever the transitions are, at each transition to experience some regression and then some rebound. The rebounds are shorter. The regression isn't all the way back to the beginning, although we can definitely fall into the trap of thinking about it that way because it triggers our old trauma, our old pain. But it has a new quality to it, and it doesn't last as long. So recognizing that our children need to experiment with it, to see, many of them need to find out, can I really be sober? Can I really drink socially, for example? Can I really hang out with my old friends? Can I walk into certain places and still be okay? And so watching that. I always talk about this idea that I think we all need to experience the futility of our old ways of coping in order to stop doing them, right? It's hard. I was just joking with a client the other day. I would like for once in my life to learn a really important lesson just because someone gave me advice or I read it in a book. It seems to me that I am one of those people who have to experience it, not just once or twice, but 4 or 5 times, just to make sure. But recognizing and having that kind of patience, even if you're not that kind of person, recognizing that might be somebody else's journey. Regression is a part of progress. It's not an excuse, but it's an awareness. And when we have zero tolerance, when we have more rigidity around it, when we don't use it as a learning opportunity, when we regress into black and white, all or nothing thinking around regression, that's when it becomes a dead end for us. That's when it becomes something that we can't or our children can't learn from. It is part of recovery. We don't seek to use it as an excuse, but understand its place and how to respond to it when it comes. It's like an accident in a car is a part of driving, but we don't look for it. We don't use it as an excuse, but I imagine all of you have had some kind of fender bender in your life, right? Some more than others. That doesn't mean that we give it an excuse, but what it does mean is we don't beat ourselves up with it, right? We don't go to that shaming and judgmental place with ourselves, that terrified place with ourselves, right? We know that death is a part of life, but we don't seek after it. And trying to not use that rigid thinking, that addictive thinking, ironically, turning a flare-up into a full-blown relapse or catastrophe. Right? There's a difference between somebody misstepping, somebody struggling, somebody falling into a hole again, and somebody completely abandoning their path, completely abandoning the old way. And part of what contributes to that, the difference in that, is our contribution can be the way we think about it, the way we hold it in our minds, and how also we encourage them to think about it at the same time. It is part of the lesson, right? It's not the test, it's the curriculum, right? And I think we think of it, life sometimes, as the test more than we think of it as the curriculum. That's a very different perspective, of course. Repeating treatments going on, part of it, like I said, is accepting that this is a journey. recognizing that we never fully arrive. I talk about my own therapy on these webinars, not simply to model for you, but to illustrate a concept that the more work that one does, the more one is aware of the work that one needs to do, right? That it's part of a healthy and balanced life. Coming to embrace our powerlessness over others is a very important and real part of this journey for parents, right? You can't fix your children. And if I knew how to fix them with one intervention, with one treatment, I would do it, right? But you can only do what you can do, and then you let go. You let go of the outcome. And that letting go of the outcome causes you or creates an ability in you to be more courageous, more honest, more authentic, more transparent, less controlling, less tied to the roller coaster with them, if you will. Sometimes clients will go back to primary care. Evoke is considered kind of a primary care, but sometimes they'll go back to a primary care. Sometimes they'll get that serious. I know many people who have been in recovery, and that's a little bit more easy to identify because they call, they talk about it. I know many people who were in multiple treatments before they got sober. I know them, they're running treatment programs, they're interventionists, they're therapists. Some of them work for us, but they were in many treatments before they got to that place. And you get to decide in the end if it's too much for you, if you need to let go to the point that you can't participate in a minute, you get to decide that. You get to do as much as you want to do. Sometimes students return to Evoke. While it wasn't a given for me that a student returned to Evoke of mine, that after they had been out of the program, graduated, and for some reason needed to come back to treatment, I would always be careful and take a step. But a couple of things. Number one, it's a different program no matter what. Part of it is working with them to help create the difference in the program this time. There's a foundation that gives you an advantage as a therapist in the treatment process when you have a returning student. Right? You try to take advantage of that. There's a familiarity in a relationship that becomes an asset to you, right? It helps you, and you're not starting back at square one. And my attitude always was, I'm glad to see you. I'm sorry that it's under these conditions. I know this might not be ideal and it might be painful, but I'm really glad to see you. And they always had feelings like, are you going to be ashamed or angry with me, disappointed? I say, no, I'm just here to help. I have my own process, my own journey. And for me to be judgmental about yours and your mistakes would only condemn me. So I want to know what we can do to work together. How did it happen? What went wrong? Right? Why the progress, and then why the regression? What happened in there? Was it too much? Did you overestimate your strength? Did you underestimate the challenges? Did you think you could manage some of the choices again with moderation? So on and so forth. Right? It becomes a different process. Like the idea of you can't step in the same river twice. You can't have the same Evoke program twice. And you work with the young person to develop that different curriculum. Sometimes you create a whole new curriculum. Sometimes you do a hybrid. Sometimes I would do the exact same curriculum because I wanted to see the change. We wanted to see the change together. How would it be different? Would it be more honest? Would it be more aware? I've talked about this already tonight. Struggles are the foundation of our strength and success. I was listening to a business lecturer the other day, and he was talking about firing somebody when they make a mistake is a stupid thing to do because mistakes are things that we can learn from. And if you're firing somebody who just made a mistake, then you're firing somebody who's going to learn a lesson and take that to the next employer. So if you can work with them around their mistakes, you get to take advantage of the mistake and the struggle and the lessons and the wisdom that come from it. I've heard students say this before. My last program was bad. I've heard them say it about us. I've heard them say it about other programs. When I was young in my career, I kind of liked it when they said it about other programs. It made me feel a false sense of security about my program. My last program was bad. I BS'd my way through it. Now I'm honest, and now I'm really doing the work. And after a while, after watching this, I realized this is just a way of you not being honest with yourself. And if you were lying yesterday, what makes me or you think that you're being honest today? It's not that simple. And I think if you can convince me and your parents that before you were lying and now you're telling the truth, that you've kind of reset the trust factor. And it doesn't quite work that way, right? You did the best you could. I've had students who told me they BS'd me, and I said, number one, you're in a residential treatment center after my program because I recommended it in part. So I don't know what you think you fooled in me. I still recommended this, that you needed help. But I wasn't under the illusion that I knew everything about you. I wasn't under the illusion that you were completely honest. I wasn't under the illusion that you were completely healed. In fact, I was quite convinced you needed more care. And I think you're just saying, when you were crying, when snot was running down your face, you were faking it? When you were angry and yelling at me, you were faking it? When you were writing manipulative letters home, you were faking it? So that statement has too many agendas in it for any of us to take it at face value. Lastly is look at your relapse and prevent your relapse and regression. The best way to manage your emotions around your child's relapse and regression, the best way is for you to look at yours and to focus on and pay attention to your relapses, your regression. I've told you the story, some of you have heard it, about the father after his son came home. He called me and said, I know I'm not supposed to lecture Brett. I know I'm not supposed to yell, but he's doing the same old stuff before. So I went into his room and I yelled at him. And I said to him, I can't believe you're doing the same things you did before that got you sent to wilderness. And we took you home to give you another chance, and now you're blowing it. And I said to him, I reflected back and I said, let me just reflect back what you just told me. You told me, Brad, I know I'm not supposed to do this. I know I'm not supposed to lecture. I know I'm not supposed to yell. But I went back upstairs and said to my son, why are you doing the things you know you're not supposed to do? And so I said to this father, I think you know the answer to that question. And what I would suggest you do is go back up to your son's room and apologize. And tell him that you figured it out and that you're struggling with your own regression. So making that shift changes the relationship, changes the focus, changes the pressure, models vulnerability, creates a safer relationship. It's important for your children to know that your life is your project, not theirs. So the take-home messages: take care of yourself and your anxiety. Own it. It's yours. I always talk about that old adage of you're only as happy as your least happy child. That's crazy. It's not their job to take care of you. It took me a lot of years, not just with my children, but in my life, to realize that it was my job to take care of me. I kept trying to get everybody else to do it. Friends, associate, colleagues, wife, children. Sometimes I still fall back into that hole, but it's mine. Learning to let go. It's a way of living. It's not a one-time event. It's a way of living. Learning to detach is a way of living, and surrender is a way of living, right? It is letting go of control. And people who let go, who detach, who surrender, they're just more honest and authentic and present. Sometimes they're even intimidating in a really impressive spiritual way. Like, gosh, I don't know how you're so honest. And you're still loving and kind, but it's not off-putting, it's surprising, it's shocking sometimes how those kinds of people who practice that in their daily lives are so strong. Faith and trust in a higher power process can be helpful, right? Letting go to it. It's not that all of your fear will go away. It's learning to walk into your fear, right? It's learning to walk past that threshold that is terrifying, that is scary, that suggests that there's no way through it. And you have evidence because you see bodies at the door of that threshold as evident. But it's like Joseph Campbell said, the cave you fear to enter holds the treasure you seek, right? We have enough awareness, enough consciousness that we're willing to do the scary thing, the hard thing. Turning it over to the child. That's what we do when we show up honestly. That's what we do when we set a healthy boundaries. We say, this is me, this is my truth, this is how I want to express it, and you get to react how you want to. But having us expect them to like it, to agree with it, to be happy with us, to understand it, all of that stuff that we do, that's so we can take care of us. That's so they can take care of us. That's not their job. Not their job. Taking it one day at a time, in the end, that's all we have anyway, is one day at a time. Doing the next right thing. Thinking of all of this as an opportunity. That's a shift. I don't want to dismiss the pain, the sadness, the fear, the anxiety. And we can learn to see the growth in all of this, the growth in the struggles, the growth and the difficulties and the mistakes of ours and of theirs. And learning to feel what you feel. Learning to listen to it better. It's not that we don't feel anymore. We just understand where it comes from and understand the lies that it tells us, what our fear tells us. We understand our sadness a little bit better, our anger a little bit better, our hurt a little bit better. Focus on your regression and relapse, what you can control. If you focus on what's within your control, you'll have less anxiety. If you focus on what's outside of your control, you'll have more anxiety and depression. Recognize, make lists of your relapse prevention plan or triggers, right? I can't tell you, it's just this simple. When parents show up like that, to me, to us, and that becomes the focus of their dialogue, of their story, rather than what their child is or isn't doing, you can feel a difference, right? This is the road less traveled. Go to support groups, go to therapy, get support. This is in lieu of asking your child to take care of you. Learn to take care of yourself. The place you go with your anxiety and fear and sadness is to people who can hold on to it. And your children can't hold on to it. And it's not their job. I used to give this assignment in the early days. I would say, in fact, we had an assignment in the early days called the regression assignment or the relapse assignment, where we would have a child write a letter in a regressive way, some old behavior, and then have the parents learn how to respond to it. Sometimes I would playfully talk to parents about, what if I had assigned your son or daughter to relapse so that you could learn your lesson? If that were true, what would be your lesson in this? So you start to think about your reaction as the point of focus rather than what they do or don't do. Stopping the black and white thinking, focusing on your response. And I get a lot of questions about this as much as anything. A final thought. Giving up is not letting go, right? Letting go is being honest. Letting go is being assertive. Letting go is being clear. Giving up is not caring. Letting go is not trying to control the other, but trying to focus on what I can control and can't control. Giving up is running away. Giving up is burying your head or medicating yourself. So that's the basic idea tonight of multiple treatments. And if it happens at a book, if it happens, I don't wish it on anybody. I don't wish it for anybody. But if our mindset is essentially that this should not be happening, if that's our mindset, then we don't get access to all the wisdoms, all the lessons, all the growth, all the transformation, however painful and uncomfortable it is. We don't get access to all those things if we pay attention to what should be happening and what shouldn't be happening. All right, Michael, I'm happy to take any questions. Okay, I'll go through upcoming announcements. The play is in New York City on wilderness therapy. It's called Wilderness. October 26th is the opening night gala. Breakfast with us on the 28th. I think, in fact, if it's not today, we're going to close the RSVP list. I think it is today. So tonight would be your last chance to sign up for that. Here are your workshops. We would like all parents to go to one of the workshops. The next workshop is at Cascades in Bend, Oregon, October 15th and 16th. I think there might still be space there. We have a Heroic Journeys, which is coming up in just over a week. That is for families. So any family can come to that. We have, I think, space for one more family. Finding You is for any individual. This is the deeper work. The journeys and the Finding You, the intensives are the deeper, more personal work. The stuff on the left is wonderful. We want everybody to get the psychoeducation, the exposure to the field staff, communications training. If you really want to go deep into your history, your family of origin, that's what the intensives are for. Those are optional, of course. We would like all families to attend 6 12-step groups. These are free, and there isn't much in this business that's free. So these are free and can be helpful. Here are the parent support groups. These are also free. I'll be in New York City, Los Angeles, the Bay Area, Atlanta, more details to come on that, and Toronto on the 12th. There's all the times, the addresses. Notice in New York City, the first invite went out with the wrong room number. Email Stephanie@evoketherapy.com to RSVP or for more information. Social media, I added something to this. If you want to find out more about our foundation for people who can't afford therapy, if you want to donate, if you want to become involved in it, you can go to the Second Nature Alumni Foundation on Facebook and get connected there. Or if you have somebody who needs help, you can have them reach out to them there. The Pursuit trips are therapy light, high adventure trips. You can schedule that as a family or for young adults. My book is available in paperback or audio. You can go to the foundation page, and 5% of your purchase goes to the charity if you buy any of the books that we recommend there. My son went through 4 therapeutic placements. He is now in a boarding school for his senior year. He admitted he has started using tobacco again. Like you said earlier, he's having to juggle more, thus more stress. In the past, tobacco use led to alcohol use, weed. I'm trying to let go. What do you suggest? Keep doing my work? I think be curious. Be curious. If you can maintain a posture of curiosity, I think you're the best resource. See, what you want to be for him, I suspect, is you want to be someone for him that if he does relapse again into alcohol or weed, that he comes to you. And if you're going to give him an I told you so message, if you're going to be rigid or terrified by it or devastated by it, right? All of those things disqualify you from being a safe person in his life. So be curious, take care of yourself, manage your codependency, watch him, be there for him. Be less opinionated, less judgmental about this. Don't lecture, don't sneak it in there. And then you'll be safer for him. And you'll want him to come to you if he needs help, instead of run away from you and hide it from you. All right, that's all for the questions this evening. Thank you for joining us tonight on the broadcast. I hope this is helpful. Remember, these are all now podcasts. So if you're listening to this on past podcasts, thank you. Please subscribe to our channel. If you haven't yet subscribed, go to Evoke Therapy Programs podcast and subscribe there. And these will automatically pop up for you. And you can listen to them on your iOS device or any device, anywhere you're at. Tomorrow's webinar at 7 p.m. Mountain Time is what place should behavioral reinforcement play in therapy? You know, there's a lot of talk in the field of therapy about if you do too much behavioral reinforcement, maybe it decreases internalization. Well, I'm going to challenge some of that and talk about how much we think about behavioral reinforcement, where it fits into our therapeutic model. Have a great evening, folks. Talk to you tomorrow night. Hope this point of contact is helpful. Good night.